Welcome to Pivot to Profit, where personal growth meets business strategy. And I'm your host, TaVia Woolley. This is episode 4 in our ongoing series. And if you're just now joining us, here's where we've been. In episode 1, I shared the books that built my thinking, the frameworks that shaped how I made decisions and lead. In episode 2, we talked about the environment and how the spaces you inhabit either grow you or hold you back. And in episode 3, I introduced the $1 Million Hour and showed you how I use travel and exposure to expand what feels possible. Mindset, environment, vision, 3 episodes of expansion. Today, we're going to go in a different direction because here's a raw truth that makes me a little uncomfortable. Because while I love talking about growth, there is a raw truth that nobody puts on a vision board. Doing the internal work does not make you immune to costly mistakes. It doesn't mean the people around you are automatically aligned with where you're going. And it definitely doesn't mean every decision you make from a place of good intention will protect you. Today's episode is one I've been sitting with for a while because it requires a level of vulnerability that doesn't come easy for me. But I made a commitment to this podcast and to you that I'm going to tell you the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And Lord, is today going to be uncomfortable? Even when it costs me something to say it out loud. So, here it is. In the last 2 years, my mistakes have cost me over $300,000. I know. Let that number sit for a second. 300,000. Now, before you close this episode, stay with me because I'm definitely not sharing this to embarrass myself. I'm sharing it because somewhere out there, you're probably about to make one of these same mistakes. Or maybe you've already made them and you're still recovering. And I want this episode to be the thing that saves you or at a minimum confirms that you're not alone. These weren't careless mistakes. They were made with good intentions, generous hearts, and sometimes, if I'm being super honest, a little too much trust in the wrong direction. In episode 1, I talked about the 48 laws of power and how I had to learn to use it not as a weapon, but as a lens, a way to see what's happening in a room before it costs you. Today's episode is me applying that lens to my own story. I'm also going to bring back what we covered in episode 2 about raising your standards and what we covered in episode 3 about discernment and who deserves access to your vision. Because my reality is these mistakes didn't happen in isolation. They happened in the gaps between the principles I knew and the boundaries I hadn't yet built. So that you don't have to pay for the same education I did, let's get into it. Mistake number 1, collaboration with unequally yoked partners. So I'm going to start here because this one is personal. I believe in community. I believe in lifting as we climb. I believe that part of my purpose is to build capacity in the people around me. And I still believe all of that. But I've had to learn the hard way where community investment ends and self-depletion begins. For a season, I entered collaborations that were designed on paper to be community building partnerships. The idea was that I would bring my expertise, my resources, and my platform to the table, and my collaborators would grow through the process. What I didn't fully account for was this. Some people don't want to be built. They want to be carried. And there is a massive difference between the two. For real. I spent significant time that translates directly to money, educating, coaching, and bringing people up to speed so that they could operate at a functional level. I was essentially running a free consultancy inside of a so-called partnership. My mental energy, my time, my frameworks, my networks, all invested into collaborations that were consuming far more than they were creating. And here's what I've come to understand. Not everyone who wants access to your resources have earned the access to your energy. In episode 2, I talked about how our spaces either grow us or hold us back. That principle applies to people too. The collaborators in your circle are either expanding your capacity or quietly draining it. I'm not the last stop on someone's journey to get themselves together. The content I create, the workshops I've built, and the frameworks I've developed, those tools exist for exactly that purpose. But my personal mental energy, that's a resource I no longer give away without return. So lesson learned. Collaboration is not charity, and charity has its own lane. Collaboration should be between people who bring complementary value to the table, not between someone who is ready and someone who is still figuring out if they want to be. Know the difference before you sign anything, including informal agreements. So here's some action steps. Before entering any collaboration, define what each party is contributing specifically, not in general terms, in specifics. Set a 30-day check-in from the start. Ask, is this collaboration energizing or depleting me? And be honest. Create a simple partnership alignment assessment. Ask yourself, does this person operate at a level that challenges me or one that requires me to slow down? Both answers have a home. Only one belongs in a collaboration. Your workshops, your content, your frameworks direct people there first. That's how you invest in community without losing yourself in the process. So let's get into mistake number 2. Not vetting everyone associated with the person you do business with. This one is sneaky because when you do your due diligence on the person you're hiring or contracting with, you feel covered. You researched them, you've liked what you saw, you made a decision. What you didn't do is vet their team. And that oversight, it cost me. Here's the reality of doing business. You are often not just hiring a person. You are hiring an ecosystem. Their staff, their subcontractors, their vendors, their inner circle. And if you assume that everyone connected to a credible person is equally as credible, you assumed wrong. The face of a business can be impeccable. What's happening behind that face can be an entirely different operation. And when things go wrong, because sometimes they do, the cost isn't just financial. It's the cost of repair or restoration, of rework, of solutions you wouldn't have needed if you had asked better questions earlier. In episode 3, I talked about the $1 million hour. That intentional pause after an experience where you extract the learning before moving on. Vetting is your $1 million hour before a business relationship. It's the moment you slow down enough to ask the questions that protect everything that comes after. So here's some lessons learned. Credibility is not contagious. The reputation of the person you hire does not automatically extend to the people they work with. Vet the whole team, not just the face. Action steps. Before signing any contract, ask who specifically will be doing the work on this project and get names. Request samples, credentials, or references for key team members, not just the lead contact. Add a due diligence clause to your contracts that allow you to approve subcontractors or team members who will have direct access to your business. Ask the question directly. Who else will be involved in delivering this work? The way someone answers that question tells you a lot. Factor team quality into your budget projections. If something goes wrong with an unvetted team member, what's the cost of repair? Price that risk in before you even begin. Mistake number 3, not checking references or having the difficult conversations with previous employers. This one lives at the intersection of community and accountability. And it's one of the most uncomfortable truths I've had to accept. In our community, and I say our community with love, we don't like to talk. We don't want to be perceived as spreading gossip. We don't want to be the one who closes the door for somebody. So we stay quiet. And that silence, it costs us. Here is the distinction I need you to understand. Gossip is opinion. Work performance is fact. These are two different conversations. And conflating them has kept too many of us from asking the questions that would have protected our businesses. Just because someone was employed by someone you trust does not mean they performed well for that person. And in our circles especially, we inherit hires based on relationship proximity rather than verified performance. I've experienced this firsthand. Whew. Someone presents themselves as wanting to grow under my leadership. They position my opportunity as a next step in their development. They subtly downplay their previous experience, not in a harsh way, but in a way that will position you as the upgrade. It's flattering, but it's also strategic. And if you don't ask the hard questions, you become the most expensive chapter in someone else's learning curve. In episode 1, I referenced StrengthsFinder and the idea that patterns reveal identity. The same is true in hiring. Work patterns don't lie. Ask the people who've watched them work. Lesson learned. A resume is a highlight reel. A reference on someone they personally know is a soft landing. The real information lives in the direct conversations you almost don't have. Have the conversation. Ask for receipts. So here's some action steps. Establish a firm rule. You do not hire anyone who has previously worked for a close colleague or business partner without a direct reference conversation. Not an email, a conversation. When calling references, ask behavior-based questions. Can you describe a time when they had to manage a difficult deadline? How did they handle the feedback? Would you rehire them? That last question is everything. Pay attention to what people say and what they leave out. Silence and vague language in a reference call is data. If someone speaks disparagingly about their former employer during the interview, even casually, consider that a signal. People who perform well rarely need to minimize where they came from to justify where they're going. Create a simple, standardized reference form. Make it a non-negotiable part of your hiring process, regardless of how they came to you. Mistake number 4, taking myself out of the game. This is the one that stings the most because it came from a good place. Duh. I wanted to delegate. I wanted to grow a team. I wanted to work on my business, not just in it. Those are all the right instincts. But here's what I got wrong. I hired expertise without context, and expertise without context is expensive. So let me explain. I operate in a very specific world. Nonprofit leadership, community organizing, maternal health advocacy, policy work, thought leadership, brand strategy. The work I do sits at the intersection of multiple complex fields. And when I handed portions of my business to professionals who were skilled in their craft but had no grounding in the context of my work, I spent more time educating them than I did benefiting from their expertise. The money I paid for their skill was largely offset by the time I spent getting them up to speed, which means I wasn't getting what I paid for. I was doing double the work in the process. I am the superstar in my business, and I don't say that arrogantly. I say it because every business has one. The person whose vision, relationships, and deep contextual knowledge cannot, and I mean cannot, simply be outsourced. That's not the person who should be removed from the equation. That's the person who should be protected, supported, and leveraged more strategically. In episode 3, I talked about the moment when a conversation at the John Maxwell Leadership Conference permanently shifted my thinking about business as an asset. What I took from that conversation was that the work isn't just about doing, it's about building something intentionally. And you cannot build intentionally when you stepped away from the thing that makes the building possible. So lessons learned. Delegation is a strategy, not an escape. The goal isn't to disappear from your business, it's to operate in your zone of genius while surrounding yourself with people who are experts in your field, not just experts in a skill. There's a difference between hiring a great marketeer who has spent years working in the nonprofit or social impact space. The latter is worth waiting for. So here's some action steps. Reframe how you hire. The question isn't just, are they excellent at their skill? The question is, are they excellent at the skill within the context of my industry? Before outsourcing any function, document the context your work lives in. Create a one-page overview of your industry, your audience, the complexity of your work. Use it as a filter in your hiring conversations. Distinguish between tasks you should delegate and decisions that require your presence. Not everything needs you, but some things do, so know the difference. Audit where you are currently spending your time. If you are spending more time managing a professional than benefiting from their work, that's a signal. Hire people who are students of your field, not just your task. Someone who reads the same publications, attends the same conferences, and understands the nuances of the work you do. Will onboard in half the time and produce twice the value. The real lesson underneath all of this, here's what I want you to hear. Every one of these mistakes have a thread running through it. And that thread is this. I undervalued my own resources, my time, my energy, my context, and my gift, and I paid for it accordingly. Not because I wasn't smart, not because I wasn't strategic, because generosity without boundaries is not a virtue. It's vulnerability. And in business, vulnerabilities get exploited. Not always maliciously, but consistently. In episode 2, I talked about buying the acrylic desk and how it represented belief, investment, the woman I was becoming. Every one of these mistakes was the inverse of that moment. They were moments where I invested in things and people that did not reflect the level I was building toward. So let this be your reminder. Your time is a resource. Your mental energy is a resource. Your reputation is a resource. Your context, the knowledge you have accumulated, The relationships you built, the work you have done is all a resource. Protect all of it accordingly. This week's Pivot Challenge. I want you to do a business relationship audit. Look at every active collaboration, contract, or professional relationship you are currently in. And for each one, answer honestly. Is this relationship generating value or consuming it? Did I vet this person or team as thoroughly as I should have? Am I operating in my zone of genius here? Or have I removed myself from something that actually requires my presence? What would it cost me to exit this relationship? And what is it costing me to stay? You don't have to make drastic moves this week, but you do have to be honest with yourselves. Because the $300,000 education I received started with moments where I didn't ask the hard questions early enough. So ask the questions now. Here's some reflection questions for you. Before you go, sit with these. Where in my business am I investing more than I am receiving? Who in my professional circle has access to my energy that haven't earned? What one hiring or partnership decision do I wish I had approached differently? And what does that teach me about the next one? Am I still in the game? Or have I handed off parts of my business that actually need me in them? As I always like to say, action creates momentum. Momentum builds confidence, and confidence changes how you show up in your business and your life. The $300,000 I spent in the last 2 years wasn't lost, it was tuition. And I tend to get every dollar of value out of what I've learned. Now, it's your turn. Take the lesson, skip the bill, and here's where we go next. Because naming the mistakes is only half the work. In our next episode, the final one in this series, I'm going to show you exactly what I've done to close those gaps. The personal blueprint I built so I don't repeat this $300,000 education. Health, mental health, image, and the practices that protect my gift going forward. If this episode named the wound, the next one shows you the healing in progress. Thank you for spending time with me today. Until next time, keep pivoting with purpose. Y'all be easy.